I'm Brooke Callahan. I'm 28 years old, and right now I'm sitting at my brother's corporate gala in a dress that fits like armor, midnight blue silk, borrowed, and doing its best to disguise the burn scar on my shoulder. Funny thing is, it's not the fire that left the deepest mark. Tonight might change everything. Someone's here who knows a version of me my family's never acknowledged. If he speaks up, the story they've told about me for a decade might finally collapse under its own weight. Before I can continue my story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is right now. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. I grew up in Westlake Hills, Texas, land of manicured lawns, private school blazers, and parents who turned success into a competitive sport. The Callahan family wasn't just known. We were curated. My dad, Dr. James Callahan, performed heart surgery like it was an Olympic event. My mom, Margaret, retired from law, but ran PTA and board meetings like depositions. My brother, Matthew, top-tier everything. Princeton undergrad, Wharton MBA, Thornton Energy Group vice president by 32. He wore achievement like cologne, strong, ever-present, and occasionally suffocating. And me, I was the one who didn't quite fit the display case. While Matt practiced PowerPoint pitches, I was sneaking peeks at our neighborhood firehouse. I knew every model of truck, memorized the ladder gear specs. I didn't care that nobody at Westlake Prep thought firefighting was a real career. From the moment I saw a woman in bunker gear pull a child from a smoking car during a highway pileup, I knew where I was headed. But knowing doesn't protect you from disappointment, especially when it comes wrapped in a parent's polite smile. When I told them I'd dropped out of Texas A&M my junior year to join the Austin Fire Department Training Academy, my father set his fork down like I'd just insulted the governor. "We don't do that," was all he said at first. My mother didn't speak for a full minute. When she finally did, she asked if this was some kind of rebellion over not getting into Yale. The next few months were silence, then cold politeness, and eventually a new family myth that Brooke was still figuring things out. I let them run with it. It was easier than correcting them at parties. What they didn't know was that while they were updating Matt's LinkedIn profile over cocktails, I was dragging hoses through burning stairwells at 4 a.m., learning how to keep people alive with nothing but instinct training and 70 pounds of gear. That's where I was the night I met Caleb Thornton Whitney's cousin, Thomas Thornton's nephew, and one of 3 people trapped inside a warehouse fire that nearly killed us all. And that's why tonight, 3 months later, I'm sitting in this ballroom, wondering what happens if someone finally says out loud what I did. In Westlake Hills, we weren't just another family, we were a legacy. The Callahan name meant something in Austin, and not just because of Dad's medical accolades, or the fact that Mom's name was listed on half the town's charitable boards. It was the way they moved through the world, poised, deliberate, always performing for the right audience. From the outside, our house was a picture of order and privilege, sprawling limestone French doors, and landscaping that never dared to bloom out of season. Inside, it was quieter but tighter. Trophies had their own shelf. College brochures were laid out like appetizers. Even praise came in polished forms, conditional, offered for metrics, not moments. We didn't celebrate small wins, only milestones with Ivy League names or 6-figure starting salaries. From the time I was 10, I understood what was expected, conform, Polish ascend. My brother Matthew understood it better than anyone. He was the template. Graduated top of his class, national merit finalist, got early admission to Princeton, then a full ride to Wharton. Dad started introducing him at events as our future CEO before he even turned 21. By the time he landed at Thornton Energy, he was already on the shortlist for leadership development. And me, I was the subplot. I tried to fit in softball captain, decent GPA, enough AP classes to stay respectable. But I always felt like I was translating from a language no one else bothered to learn. I wasn't rebellious. I was just curious in different directions. When I asked questions about emergency services or mentioned the firehouse visits during career day, Mom would smile thinly and redirect the conversation to something more aspirational. My dad didn't speak much about it at all. Just pursed his lips or reminded me that medicine was noble and safe, that maybe I should shadow a doctor sometime instead of following around firefighters like they were rock stars. He meant well, I think, in the way that people do when they mistake safety for love. The more I watched Matthew perform, the more I understood the stakes. He was rewarded for alignment. The moment he landed his job at Thornton, our parents practically hosted a town hall about it. The calls poured in. "You must be so proud. He's done everything right." And between those comments and the polite pauses was the unspoken question, "What about your daughter?" "She's exploring," Mom would say. "She's always had a unique spirit." That was the branding language for failure. It echoed at fundraisers and church socials, embedded in my bones like smoke. The day I told them I was leaving college, we sat in the formal dining room, the place where only serious conversations happened. College decisions, financial updates, one rare apology after a fight with a neighbor. I remember the light filtering through the chandelier, catching the silverware just so. I said I've been accepted into the Austin Fire Department's training program. Silence. Then Dad, "Are you telling us you're dropping out of Texas A&M to chase some adrenaline rush?" "No," I said. "I'm telling you, I found the thing that makes me feel alive." That's when Mom stood up and quietly left the room. No shouting, just retreat. They never asked a single question about the program, not how long it was, what it entailed, what I would learn. Just cold judgment, then absence. For the next year, we barely spoke. Matthew emailed me links to corporate safety internships, and I stopped replying after the third one. Our paths had split, and they made it very clear which one they thought led to somewhere real. But what they didn't know was that while they were preserving the Callahan family brand, I was busy building something else. There's something people don't tell you about choosing a path your family doesn't respect. You don't just lose their approval. You lose the version of yourself they were willing to love. When I left Texas A&M, I didn't pack boxes. I packed silence. The kind that echoes between text messages that never arrive, calls that go unanswered holidays, where your chair at the table feels optional. But I wasn't lost. I was more certain than ever. The Austin Fire Department Academy was brutal by design, and that's why I chose it. Day one, we were warned. This place doesn't make room for ego excuses or second guessing. You're either all in or you're in the way. It sounded harsh. It was exactly what I needed. 32 recruits started that spring, 4 women. I was the youngest by almost 3 years. The first few weeks were a blur of motion and muscle failure. Hauling charged hose lines up 5 flights of stairs, dragging dummies heavier than actual humans through pitch-black mazes, running ladders until our arms screamed. Every drill felt like a test, not just of endurance, but of belonging. And not just to the department, to the version of myself I was desperately trying to claim. There was one moment, week 5 heat advisory, in full effect 108 degrees on the asphalt. We'd just finished a simulated high-rise rescue when I dropped to one knee from dehydration. Captain Ramirez looked down at me and said, "You want to sit this out?" I shook my head, stood up, swallowed bile. "Good," he said, "because nobody's going to rescue you when you freeze up in a fire." That sentence became a mantra. No one's coming to rescue you, not in the fire, not in life. By the halfway point, we'd already lost 6 recruits. A few quit. A few were cut for safety violations. The pace didn't slow to let you think. That was part of it. Fires don't pause for your emotions. Victims don't wait for your certainty. You either build instinct or you break. Some nights I'd come back to my tiny studio apartment near South Congress with burns from my gear bruises I couldn't explain, and a quiet ache in my chest that had nothing to do with exhaustion. I'd think about Mom's voice on that last phone call. "You're throwing everything away." I'd wonder if maybe she was right. But then I'd remember what I saw the first time I rode along on a shift, 2 women pulling a kid from a flipped SUV. No hesitation, no glory, just action. I'd remember the way they handed him off to EMS and went straight back to stabilizing the wreck. No applause, no photo ops, just purpose. That's what I wanted. That's what I was chasing. When we hit week 14, the final test, I passed in the top 5 of my class. Not the top. I wasn't perfect, but I was present, capable, and finally visible. At least to someone. My parents came to graduation, sat in the back row, hands folded, expressions unreadable. When my name was called, they clapped. Politely. Like they were acknowledging a favor, not a victory. Afterward, Dad gave me a once-over and said, "At least the uniform looks professional." I nodded. That's the point. He didn't ask where I'd be stationed. Mom kissed my cheek stiffly. Just be careful, okay? They left before the reception. No photos, no words to mark the moment. But I didn't need their congratulations anymore. I had my badge, I had my station, I had my place in the fire. My first assignment was with Engine 17, an older station tucked into East Austin that ran more calls than any other company in the city. 15 to 20 calls per shift. Fires, wrecks, overdoses, domestic incidents, brush rescues, collapsed scaffolding. It was a constant blur of response and readiness. The crew was tight-knit, mostly veterans. A few had worked together for over a decade, bonded by sweat and shared trauma. They didn't say much at first, especially not to me. I was the rookie, the dropout daughter of Westlake royalty, the girl they assumed had something to prove. And I did. Not for their approval. Not anymore. I needed to prove something to myself, that I hadn't given up everything, family, comfort, safety, for an illusion, that I had what it took to walk through fire and keep my head clear. The city taught me fast. The difference between training and real life wasn't just temperature, it was unpredictability. Victims didn't follow protocol. Fires didn't respect building codes. One time we responded to what was supposed to be a routine kitchen fire in a duplex. We found a mother unconscious in the bathtub while her toddler sat on the tile floor crying, covered in soot. We weren't supposed to be upstairs. We were clearing the first floor, but something in my gut told me to check that hallway. Instinct. Afterward, my Lieutenant Gomez just nodded at me once. Good call. That was how it worked. Respect came slow in nods and quick grins, not words. Nobody threw you a parade for doing your job well, but they watched. They kept track. I stopped counting the bruises. I learned how to keep my gear clean, my air supply, steady my hands moving even when my legs were shaking. I got better at ignoring the texts from home that came once every few months. Hope you're safe. Heard there was a fire in South Austin, followed by silence. They wanted the illusion of caring without the discomfort of actually asking what I did. The bright spot in all of it was Captain Eleanor Morris, our newly transferred captain from San Antonio. She was a legend in the department, known for her cool under pressure and her unshakable command presence. From the moment she walked into the station, the whole dynamic changed. And she noticed me. "You've got good instincts, Callahan," she said one night after a confined space rescue where I'd caught the signs of impending collapse seconds before our path caved in. "That can't be taught." I tried to brush it off. She wouldn't let me. "Don't downplay it. Not here. Not with me." Under her mentorship, I started developing specialized skills, search and rescue operations, confined space navigation, victim stabilization, under pressure. She let me lead a drill 1 month in, told me I had command potential, told me she could see the difference between people who were chasing adrenaline and people who were chasing purpose. I hadn't realized until then that I was still hungry for that kind of belief. Not from my family, from someone who understood what it meant to risk everything and still come back whole. By the end of my first year, I wasn't just accepted, I was trusted. But with every step I took forward in the firehouse, the gap between me and my family grew wider. At Thanksgiving, I sat silently while Matthew gave a toast about legacy and direction. Nobody asked what I'd been doing. I didn't offer. Let them keep their silence. I was learning how to speak with actions, and I was just getting started. It happened on a Monday in late July, just past midnight. A 3-alarm fire had broken out in an abandoned industrial building off Airport Boulevard. We'd been on shift for 18 hours. No one was fresh, and the heat index hadn't dipped below 90 since noon. We were already stretched thin from back-to-back medical calls when the dispatch came in. The building was a mess, half-gutted years of code violations, open-air scrap, stacked floor to ceiling. Someone had been squatting there, maybe more than one person. A flare-up in the back corner had gone unnoticed for too long. By the time we arrived, flames had already eaten through the ceiling beams. I remember the feeling in my chest as we stepped inside thick pressing wrong. Captain Morris gave the orders. I was paired with Hernandez to clear the west side mezzanine. We moved fast, sweeping the rooms, calling out, navigating tight corridors barely wide enough for our tanks. And then the roof gave way. I don't remember the fall so much as the impact, a split-second flash of noise, and searing heat, then stillness. My shoulder took the brunt of it. Part of a ceiling beam caught me on the way down. My gear did its job mostly, but the burn slipped past, the seal clawed its way across my skin. I stayed conscious. That surprised me. Hernandez called for backup. They dragged me out before the second collapse, but I knew the damage was done. I could feel it in the shallow breaths, the sting across my collarbone, the gritty tightness in my muscles. It wasn't life-threatening, but it left a mark. Second-degree burns, fractured collarbone, torn muscle, 6 weeks off-duty minimum, surgery to repair the ligament. I hated every second of that hospital bed. Captain Morris came by twice. The second time she brought me my badge, "You earned this the hard way," she said. "And for the record, I trust you more now, not less." It meant everything. My parents came one time. Dad showed up with 2 medical journals in his hand, articles about workplace injury recovery in high-impact fields. He sat by the bed flipping pages while I stared at the IV drip. Mom brought a lavender blanket. She folded it neatly at the end of the bed, said, "We're just glad you're not more hurt," and then went silent. When I tried to talk about what happened, about the man we pulled out, about the moment I thought I might not make it, Dad cut me off. "You know," he said, "if you worked at a desk, the worst thing that could happen is carpal tunnel." I laughed bitter. If I worked at a desk, someone else would have died in there. He didn't respond. Just looked at my chart and said, "They're keeping you on IVs too long. This protocol's outdated." It wasn't cruelty. That was the hardest part. It was detachment. A clinical lens applied to something deeply human. My pain didn't register as real, it was a variable, a case study, something to be minimized and rationalized. When they left, the room felt colder. I stared at the lavender blanket for a long time. It was soft, pretty, impractical, like their version of me. But the scar beneath my bandages, that was mine. It hurt, it healed, and it told the truth. It started like any other overnight call. 2:11 a.m. tones blaring through the station. Report of visible flames at a TEG-owned logistics warehouse on the edge of the Port of Houston, which meant chemicals tight corners and old metal siding that crumpled like paper in extreme heat. We were out the door in under 90 seconds, sirens bouncing off the empty streets. My body ran on muscle memory and adrenaline boots gear SCBA tank radio check. Captain Morris's voice sliced through the radio with calm precision. Engine 17 search and rescue team assigned to North Quadrant. Reports of 3 trapped security guards on second floor. 3 trapped. Building already compromised. I didn't say a word. Neither did my partner Morales. We knew the clock had already started counting down. When we got there, the scene was chaos. Flames shot out of windows. The roof glowed like embers ready to collapse. Battalion chief flagged us down, the west stairwell's intact for now. Make it fast. Inside, the air turned thick fast. Smoke clouded the beams of our flashlights. Our radios crackled but stayed clear. The layout matched nothing on the blueprint. Furniture shipping crates and twisted shelving had created a maze. The fire had carved its own path, and we had to navigate blindly through what was left. We found them in the security office, crouched low under a metal desk. 2 men, 1 woman, all conscious, one bleeding from the scalp, another coughing hard enough to retch. I remember seeing the younger man, first curly hair, soaked with sweat, face streaked with ash. His name tag caught the beam of my light, Caleb Thornton. We didn't know it then, none of us did, that he was the nephew of the man who ran the company hosting my brother's gala. All we knew was that we had maybe 10 minutes before the second floor gave out. Less if the ceiling told the truth. I helped stabilize the woman Shelby with a spare oxygen tank and told the others to stay close. I repeated it 3 times. Close is the difference between rescue and recovery. We took the same route back until we hit the collapse. A structural support had failed. The stairwell that brought us up was gone. I radioed down. Options rerouted us to the east exit, but that side was already fully engulfed. Captain Morris came through firm northwest corridor. "Find the gap. You've got 5 minutes of air left." I knew what that meant. We weren't getting backup. It was on us. We doubled back fast. My SCBA alarm started beeping low air. Morales's wasn't far behind. I pulled the civilians with everything I had, trying not to think about the searing heat biting at my shoulder, trying not to flinch when another steel beam groaned just above our heads. We reached the last hallway. The exit was blocked rubble and burning debris stacked 5 feet high. But there was a crawl space barely 2 feet wide. We'd have to go single file. I removed my SCBA and shoved it through, against every protocol. Then I helped Shelby through, then the older man, then Morales. Caleb hesitated. "You're last?" he asked. I nodded. "Thank you," he said, his voice cracking. By the time I squeezed through my jacket, had caught on something sharp. I had to rip it off, felt my shoulder burn open again as I pushed forward. Then I was out. Fresh air never felt so sacred. Sirens, medics, flashlights, voices. We lived. All of us. 3 weeks passed before I realized who Caleb Thornton really was. At first, he was just the security supervisor from the warehouse fire. The one with the steady voice and calm eyes despite the chaos. The one who, even while injured, helped get Shelby over the debris pile. But one afternoon, I got a handwritten note delivered to the station. Expensive stationery, elegant cursive. "Brooke, there are no words strong enough to express my gratitude for what you did. My uncle Thomas Thornton would like to meet you. He knows, he insists. Please consider joining us at the annual company gala. You saved a family member. We want to recognize that. Caleb." I stared at the note for a long time, then folded it twice and stuffed it into my locker. A week later, the formal invitation arrived: Thornton Energy Group Corporate Gala. Grand Ballroom Frost Tower. Formal attire required. Accompanied again by a personal note from my brother family expected to attend. Try not to talk about work too much. Matt. And that's how I found myself here, wearing borrowed silk and concealed scars, sitting near the back, while my brother held court in a circle of investors and executives. I watched from a safe distance, sipping my water, while the string quartet shifted to a soft jazz cover. My parents floated around the room, graceful, and practiced introducing themselves with the ease of people who know how to belong. They hadn't seen me yet, or maybe they had, and were pretending otherwise. Either way, I stayed put. I'd done my part. I'd shown up. That should have been enough. But just after dessert, I saw him. Thomas Thornton, CEO, power embodied in a tailored tuxedo and silvered hair. He moved with the confidence of someone who'd built something massive and made it look easy, and he was walking straight toward me. I stood out, I knew that. I didn't look like the other guests. I didn't belong to their world of corporate ranks and wealth portfolios. So when he stopped a few feet in front of me and said, "Forgive me, but have we met?" I froze. "I'm Brooke Callahan," I offered, "Matt's sister." His brow furrowed, then shifted. "No, that's not where I know you from," he said. His eyes scanned my face, then dropped slightly, catching the slight edge of my burn scar. "The fire," he said softly. "You pulled Caleb out." I nodded slowly. "Yes, sir. He was one of 3 we located during the search. He didn't say thank you. He didn't need to." His entire face softened, melted into something raw. Something real. "You saved my family." I glanced away, embarrassed. "We were just doing our job." He stepped closer. "You risked your life. Caleb told me everything. About how you gave up your own oxygen. About the exit collapse. About how he wouldn't be here if you hadn't made that call." I tried to say anything. But he wasn't finished. He turned, lifted a hand, and waved someone over. My parents. They approached, smiling, unsure. Until he said the words that stopped time. "Did you know your daughter is a hero?" My father blinked. Excuse me." She saved my nephew Thornton, continued placing a hand gently on my back. Risked her life inside a collapsing structure to get him and his colleagues out. My mother opened her mouth, but no sound came. And then he raised his champagne glass and said loudly, "Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention for a moment?" The music stopped. The room turned, and in the pause that followed, everything began to shift. The applause was loud. Too loud. I stood frozen, while an entire ballroom filled with Austin's corporate elite clapped for the one person in the room who hadn't worn her job like a badge until someone else handed her one. I wanted to disappear, crawl under a linen-draped table, vanish behind the floral arrangements. But Thomas Thornton kept his hand on my back, steady and warm, anchoring me like a beam in a burning house. When the clapping finally faded, he leaned in and said quietly, "Caleb will never forget you. Neither will I. I'd like to talk more after tonight." Then, before stepping away, he added, "You didn't just save 3 lives. You reset a compass. That matters." I turned slowly, expecting my parents to resume their well-trained emotional neutrality. But for once, even they seemed unsure of the script. My mother's eyes darted across the room like she needed a teleprompter. My father looked directly at me, then down at his glass, then back up again. "That was unexpected," he said. Jason didn't speak. He just stared. Stephanie, his fiancée, touched his arm lightly. "I had no idea," she said genuinely. "That's incredible." No one knew what to do with me now. I disrupted the roles, rewritten the ending without their consent. Later that night, Jason texted, "Meet me tomorrow morning, usual coffee spot, just us." I replied, "Fine." I got there early out of habit. South Austin. One of those rustic meets minimalist places with reclaimed wood tables and a menu that made coffee sound like chemistry. Jason showed up 5 minutes late, he always did, wearing jeans and a soft gray sweater. No tie, no watch. "You're still the only one who's ever early," he said as he sat down. Then added, "Still showing up places people think you won't." I gave him a look. "So, is this about your career panic, or a delayed apology?" He smiled, but there was something hollow behind it. "Both, probably." We sat in silence for a moment, sipping coffee, letting the buzz of background chatter fill the space. Then he said, "I've worked at Thornton for 7 years. Thomas Thornton has never once publicly acknowledged a mid-level employee at that gala. And last night, he gave you a standing ovation." I shrugged. It wasn't about me. It was about Caleb. "No," he said, "it was about who got to save Caleb, and how that person doesn't look like what the city expects." I waited. "I've spent most of my life trying to become someone people like Thomas would respect," Jason admitted. "Last night, I saw him respect you more deeply in 5 minutes than I've felt in years." I didn't know what to say. It wasn't a jab, it was a confession. He leaned forward, voice low. "You were essential. Not admirable, not brave in a charity sense. Essential. I don't think I've ever said that about anyone in this family who wasn't wearing a suit." For a second, the little sister in me wanted to cry. But I didn't. I nodded. "I'm not looking for a medal," I said. "I just don't want to have to shrink to fit the family mold." "You shouldn't have to," he said. "I see that now." We sat there, not quite friends, not quite rivals, just two people raised under the same roof, finally learning to speak the same language. "I was wrong," he said at last, "about everything." That I believed. 6 months later, I stood in front of Austin Fire Department headquarters, sunlight bouncing off the stone and glass, as a crowd gathered for the lieutenant promotion ceremony. My dress blues were freshly pressed. My new insignia rested in a small velvet box in my palm. Captain Morris was the one who pinned it on. "You earned this the long way," she said with a small smile, her hand firm on my shoulder. "You didn't just prove them wrong. You proved yourself right." My throat tightened. Not because of the rank, or the formalities, or the weight of the moment, but because I'd spotted them. 2 stiff chairs, 3rd row. My parents. They sat like people still learning a new language, unfamiliar with the customs of this world, but determined to stay seated. Determined not to leave early this time. Mom wore pearls and navy. Dad had swapped his usual tailored blazer for something closer to casual. It didn't fit quite right. That detail stuck with me. When my name was called, they clapped. No polite tap, tap, tap. No feigned smiles. Actual clapping. Their hands touched like they meant it. After the ceremony, they didn't rush to the car. My mother approached first. She looked down at the insignia on my chest, then up at my face. "It's beautiful," she said, touching it lightly with her fingers. "You look strong." I nodded. "I am." Then Dad stepped in, clearing his throat the way he always did when unsure of his words. "That fire. The one at the warehouse." I read the full report. The section about the collapse, the low air protocol. He paused. "I don't think I ever really understood what it was you do out there. Not until I saw those numbers. Of course it would be numbers. Safety margins, response windows, thermal breakdowns. His version of empathy came in data, but this time I didn't mind. Because he was trying. He continued, "Thomas Thornton called me last month. Asked me to serve on the board of the new First Responder Family Fund he's launching. Said he wanted a medical perspective. Said your name came up in every planning meeting. That stopped me." "You said yes," I asked. He nodded slowly. I said I'd be honored. I wasn't sure if I wanted to hug him or cry, or just stand there forever, absorbing what that really meant. He also asked if we'd help develop safety protocols for the program. protective gear upgrades, field response trauma kits. Said he wanted the best for the people risking everything. I looked between them. My mother, for once, was quiet. My father, earnest. They weren't faking it. "We're proud of you," Mom said finally. "We don't always know how to show it, but we are." I believed her, or at least I believed she wanted to mean it. Captain Morris came by a minute later and introduced herself formally. My father shook her hand, asked about equipment response times, what advancement opportunities looked like across the ranks. He listened carefully to everything she said. It wasn't some dramatic conversion. They didn't suddenly wear Firefighter mom and dad t-shirts or shout my name from rooftops. But they showed up. They stayed. They listened. And for the first time in years, they looked at me and didn't see a disappointment. They saw a leader. In the months after my promotion, things kept shifting quietly, steadily, like new roots growing beneath scorched earth. I wasn't just a lieutenant now. I was running our community outreach program, the one that sends firefighters into schools and local centers to teach safety, preparedness, and more than anything, trust. Kids in East Austin, many of whom had never met a firefighter who looked like them, started calling me Miss Brooke, like I was their teacher. And in a way, I was. One Friday, while setting up gear for a demo at a middle school, Caleb Thornton showed up. I hadn't seen him since the gala, aside from a few exchanged texts. "Thought I'd check this out," he said, holding 2 coffees and looking slightly overdressed for a school gym. "Hope I'm not intruding." "You're always welcome," I said. "But next time, bring sneakers." He laughed and handed me one of the cups. I wanted to say thank you, again. I don't think I ever properly did. "You said it that night," I replied. "I mean, for what came after," he clarified. "For reminding me that how we treat people matters more than how we present ourselves." Caleb had since been promoted to head of security for Thornton Energy. But today, he was just another adult standing beside kids in awe of turnout gear and fire hoses. That afternoon, as I packed up the equipment, I found a crayon drawing left on the edge of a table. It showed a figure in a fire helmet standing tall next to flames. Below it, in big block letters, was written, "My hero, Lieutenant Callahan." I added it to the growing collage in my locker back at the station. Jason and I had started talking regularly again. Not performative check-ins, but real conversations. He invited me to dinner at his new house, introduced me to his coworkers, not just as his sister, but as the one who made national news and still gets up before sunrise to teach kids how to survive a fire. At his wedding, I stood in a charcoal suit, my dress blues didn't feel right that day, beside a photo wall curated by Whitney. One frame held a picture of me at the promotion ceremony. Another showed me in full turnout gear helmet tucked under one arm. My mother had chosen it, apparently. She told me later, it felt dishonest, not to show what you really are. We were never going to be a family of endless hugs or flowery emotions. But we had something better, now: mutual respect. Space to be different. Conversations that didn't end with disappointment. The First Responder Family Fund launched that fall with a gala of its own, this time with a very different guest list. EMTs, firefighters, dispatchers, and their families. People who rarely wore gowns unless someone forced them to. And they were honored like the heroes they are. I served on the advisory board. So did my father. He even gave a short speech. Not perfect, but real. "I once told my daughter she was throwing her future away," he said. "Turns out she was saving someone else's." I watched from the wings, no longer waiting to be seen, no longer apologizing for the smoke in my lungs or the scars on my skin. I was here, rooted, rising. Sometimes the hardest part of following your own path isn't the risk, it's the silence that comes with it, the distance it creates, the misunderstandings, the label of failure from people who never understood your mission in the first place. But if you keep walking, if you stay grounded in your own truth, that path can lead somewhere powerful. Has there ever been a moment in your life when you had to choose between approval and purpose? Did you follow your heart or someone else's expectations? Drop your story in the comments. I read everyone. If this journey resonated with you, hit like, subscribe, and share it with someone who's redefining what success means for them. And remember, sometimes the ashes we rise from are the very ones we were told would burn us alive.